spoilers ahead. You have been warned, my pretties.
What's up guys, it's Project. Now that we know the stats of all the 8 new weapon types and have a good sense of their movesets and how they perform from the recent Red Bull event, I figured I'd make some quick builds for you guys to go into the DLC, you pick up the weapon, and just use it right away without the need for tinkering with stats. I've already made a couple versatile builds, and a lot of these weapons can fit into them easily, since a lot of the requirements for the weapons shown were really low. But I did want to cover some ones I haven't done yet, so if you're hyped to use the new weapons from the DLC, slam that like button, turn on the freaking notification bell, and let's begin. First off, Int Faith is getting love in the DLC. Pretty much all these Smithscript weapons had quad scalings, which includes Int and Faith, very similar to the Sword of Night and Flame. Smithscript weapons are basically normal weapons, but with a special R2 that allow you to chuck them at enemies from afar. There was a spear, a hammer, an axe, and daggers shown in the Red Bull event, and among those 4, daggers and the hammer seemed really good, with the spear being able to throw really far. The best thing about these weapons is they don't consume FP since they're just normal R2s, and they can be infused with Ash of Wars on top, giving you close and long range options all in one. So here's the build. This time I'm not going to account for specific armor since most of you probably want to fashion souls, but I do account for a decent setup with the goal of at least wielding both the hammer and the Smithscript daggers without hard swapping. So if the hammer is too slow for an enemy, you simply switch to your daggers and do really fast attacks from afar. But until you find these weapons, you're going to use the Sword of Night and Flame, which is still pretty strong to this day, giving you a magic option with its beam and a fire option for AoE clear. But since magic is the more powerful point, we are going more int than faith. Level 150, 59 vigor, 20 mind because snap eats a lot of FP, as well as for the spells, 20 endurance, 20 strength for the Smithscript hammer, dex at 13 since you can increase dex with Millicent's prosthesis or Kina's mask if need be, but the 13 dex covers all the weapons so far, then int at 50 and faith at 40. It is worth noting that the weapons in the showcase were either keen or heavy infused, so it's hard to say how high their letter grades go for int and faith, but in the dagger's case, I would make them frost infusion so you can proc frost buildup fast from afar. For talismans, Smithscripts are charge attacks, so we have to include the axe talisman. And the rest is up to you, honestly. Erdtree's favor +2 is great for weight and life, Filigreed's is great for snap to reduce that FP cost, and then either Alexander's shard for the weapons, or maybe an int or faith increasing talisman. Consecutive attacks could also potentially work with the daggers due to their speed, so that's a potential option, but do not use scorpion charms. I repeat, do not use scorpion charms. You will die in a DLC way more with them on, so just omit them from any build that has them, including mine.
But since we scale int and faith, Gelmir Glint Staff with Golden Order Seal are great. Staff for spells and seal for mostly buffs.
Now, int faith spells like Rancor are not that great to be honest, so hopefully in the DLC we'll get more dual ones. Otherwise, I didn't have time to test any spells today, but these are my suggestions. Golden Valve for the damage and the damage negation buff. Flame Grant Me Strength if you want to scale snap damage, or make a fire infused hammer to combo with the cold daggers. Then we have Great Glintstone Shard, which I've seen someone use that in the DLC event against the dungeon boss, and it pretty much killed faster than any other thing that they use against it. Then Terra Magic for a magic buff, Stars of Ruin, cause you know why, Rykard's Rancor and Ghost Flame. I haven't tested these, but just giving you some options. And then Radahgon's Light, which is great for AoE clear and pretty annoying in PvP. And lastly, Pest Rez, since against certain bosses it can actually shred, although with 40 faith I'm not sure how viable that is, but whatever, just an option. Okay, next build, Beast Claw and Fist Build. Beast Claws are a new form of claw that have wild attacks that give you way more range than normal claws. At the Red Bull event, the claws were actually the only unique weapon at the event, the Red Bear Claws, and the requirements were very low. And for the other weapon, the new hand-to-hand fist, they are also quite similar, but also different. They're definitely more Shaolin monk style karate attack pattern with really cool kicks. And these did pretty well in the event as well against all the enemies, so we're gonna assume this is gonna be more stance breaking while the claws are just general damage. But for now, since both the claw and fist seem to be low scalings, only reaching B, your best options are going to be either a status with cold and bleed, or elemental with a fire, lightning, or magic infusion. And I actually made a build with beast claws in mind with normal claws, and from my test, it's like insanely fun. but I don't want to release it now since other YouTubers will just copy it before I even play the DLC, so I'm gonna hold it back until DLC. But until then, I will give you the stat spread for the strength leaning version at least, which you would go with bleed infused beast claws and fire infused fists, since fire scales with strength. But if you're using my Dex Arcane build and want to use fists, you can just use Electrify Armament with keen scaling. But 27 Arc gives you access to Moog Spear, which is a great AoE option for packs of enemies. In fact, with these stats, you can also use the new Fire Greatsword in the DLC as well, so you have a big Zweihander option too. Nice. Probably go with Heavy Infusion on that. For talismans, you'd want both Millicent's and Rotten Sword Insignia, because you got a lot of attacks, and the rest is up to you. Incantations, Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, Blood Flame Blade, and whatever cool new stuff the DLC will bring. Next up, Odachi, or the Great Katana. We got somewhat of a good look at the Odachi from the event, not really from damage, but we did see the moveset, and the range and speed of it is really impressive. Really good pokes, and has a stance-based Ash of War doing karate chops on mofos' heads. I mean, just check out the speed, dude. I think this does have potential for PvP, and for PvE, it'll likely perform similar to the Nagakiba or Bloodhound's Fang. It actually weighs less than Bloodhound's Fang, which is cool. However, the one from the event is quality-based. I thought they were going to be more strength-based, but with the heavy infusion at 80 strength, the scaling only went to B. Same thing with Keen. So while it's faster than I thought, aside from the Ash of War, it is still slower than normal katanas, so going all in on bleed might not be the best option. So I would go for a pure damage setup into strength or dex and just use buffs. Or you can just go with the previous spread from the claw build with heavy infusion, slap Blood Flame Blade on it, and chop the DLC's face in. And you have to make those sound effects every time you do an Ash of War, by the way. Now, we do know from the previews that there is a stance boosting talisman, which is going to boost your stance damage, like Unsheathe. So you could go with that route with the Odachi, boosting Unsheathe, or this new stance here, which ties into the next build, the Light Greatsword. Milady. This weapon has an insane moveset. Like, I'm pretty sure all their animation time went into just this one weapon more than any other. But it flows really well between attacks. You can stop strings midway, so it's not that committal, and the range is actually really good. And it comes with a new stance called Milady. Come on, Miyazaki. This should be for katanas. But hey, it might still be since this weapon isn't a unique weapon, it's a common weapon. But like the Odachi, it only goes to B scaling with Keen. So freak it. Here's a dex spread for using both the Great Katana and the Light Greatsword and the fist weapons too. All these spreads in the video are based off Vagamon, but don't take them too seriously, it's just suggested stats. But this reaches the 80 dex cap this time, as you only need 14 strength for the GK, and going with 15 faith this time, or Flame Grant Me Strength for fist damage, and this time we're gonna have the fist in the left hand and use Golden Vow on it. It'll be weaker than normal Golden Vow, but it saves you 10 points to put into stamina, so fist weapons are going to have Golden Vow in the left hand, you buff and then switch to your Odachi, or just use the fist itself. And for talismans, again, the stance boosting talisman from the DLC will affect both the Odachi and the Light Greatsword, but also Alexander's Shard to boost skill damage, and the other two are up to you. And honestly, this build can also be used for the next weapon. Bro, this DLC is all dex based. What the fuck?
You can't keep getting away with this!
The next weapon is the Backhand Blades. Pretty similar to dual-wielding curved swords, although these are paired swords, so you don't have to upgrade twice. And they seem to be pretty fast with more forward momentum than the dual swords. Probably not as good for jump attacks, but probably better for just normal spamming. And they come with a new sick and spammable blind spot Ash of War, which does a little dodge into a slash, which was actually pretty decent against the boss or enemies from the Red Bull event. But for these, you have two options. The spread I mentioned above, maybe go Keen with the Electrify Armament infusion, should be strong, or just use my Dex Arcane build and go bleed in place of the dual bandit curse sword setup, your choice. 2 weapons left. Thrusting Shield. Thrust. Oh boy. This was honestly better than I thought. Elijah used it against the boss in the Red Bull event, and it pretty much trivialized the boss compared to any other melee weapon. So it's a great shield, you block, you counter guard, and stance breakdown. Honestly, this might be easy mode. When I did my Crucible build in my Strength Faith video, it kinda owned, so yeah. Now you don't even need a second weapon because the shield is the weapon. Although, keep in mind, the negation, you don't get full negation, so that is a downside. But surprise, surprise, it's dex based. Well, this one was at least. I'm sure there's gonna be a strength based one, but for time's sake, I would just use the dex spread with this, but put one more point into strength to 15 to actually use it. Although I guess if you two-hand it, you also get boosted strength, so maybe not. But this one is more talisman based than anything, as you'd want the Great Shield Talisman perhaps, then the Curved Shield Talisman for guard counters, and I'm not sure if it counts as a thrusting weapon, but if it does, you can throw on the Spear Talisman for damage, and then finally something like the Axe Talisman for charge attacks, or some utility like Great Giant Arsenal or Erdtree's Favor. I don't know if the weapon can be infused, or if it just counts as shield attack infusions, but you can also buff it with Scholar's Shield spell, although you would have to invest a little bit into int. Now, I will mention that one of the preview guys from 2 weeks ago said that there's a tier that enables you to perfect guard like Sekiro for 3 whole minutes, and the guard counters after the perfect block dealt 40% increase damage. So if that's a thing, then that pairs really well with his thrusting shield or any great shield. So this might be the dark horse of the DLC, that tier combined with this shield. And lastly, we have perfumes. That's right, perfume weapons that you can attack with a bunch of magical fairy dust AoE that doesn't consume actual perfume bottles, thank God. And it can be infused, which is pretty crazy, although it probably won't have access to a lot of Ash of Wars. But for this one, I really can't say much, as we kind of have no idea the best way to scale them, or how much stance damage they deal, etc. But from the footage, they seem fairly strong, so the best I can give you is a stat recommendation, going for a Dex Faith hybrid, which they also seem to be dealing pure damage types only. In the event, there was 2 of them, one dealt only fire and one dealt only lightning, so it's likely that you have to upgrade and have multiple of these bottles equipped to account for elements that you're ineffective against. So with this spread, you can use both. As far as talismans, again, no idea, but hopefully the Perfumer Talisman will work for their damage, and you might want to test consecutive damage with Rotten and Millicents. And for incantations, you would want to go with something like this, and those are my pre-DLC mini builds for you guys. Hopefully this gives you some ideas, or at least a nice base spread to go into the DLC with. If you liked the video, give it a like, comment down below which weapon you plan to use or main in the DLC. I'm most excited for Beast Claws, and probably the Thrusting Shield and Throwing Daggers, but the DLC is releasing on the 20th for PC, so at 6 PM Thursday, we gon' stream and destroy the DLC. So make sure to tune into the streams and subscribe for more Elden Ring epicness. Sniffer, sniffer, honey hair, sniffer, sniffer.